Hello, everyone. Good evening. And thank you very much for being in our important session, not only for the National Statistical Institutes, but also for our countries and for our actually government, how really the partnership inside our countries, how we work together on the voluntary national reports. So our main objective of this side event is to foster the dialogue between the statistics community and the policy community to support the evidence-based voluntary national reports processes in countries. It's been now a couple of years that many countries have presented their VNR reports, and we have really now best practices that we can really learn from each other, and how can the statistics community with the policy makers community, how we can have a really evidence support VNR reports. So the structure of the meeting will be a short presentation on the voluntary national reports process from Ms. Irina Zubishevich of the Office of Intergovernmental Support and Coordination for Sustainable Development. Ms. Irina is coordinating the VNR process at the UN. So we will have a short presentation by Ms. Irina, and then we will have two topics for discussion that we would like our esteemed panels to discuss. This time, our panelists are from different countries, and they are from the statistics community in addition to the policymaker community. So we are really very much thrilled having them both on our panel. So we'd like now to also to introduce our panelists. I will start with Ms. Irina. It's very difficult to family name, Zubishevich, and I really apologize if I just spell it wrongly. She's the Chief Intergovernmental Policy and Review Branch, Office of Intergovernmental Support and Coordination for Sustainable Development, UNDESA. Our panel members, Albania, Mrs. Delina Ibrahimay, the Director General of Albania Institute of Statistics and Stat, and Ms. Ingrid Prezerina, the First Secretary of the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Albania to the United Nations. From Colombia, we have our esteemed colleagues from Colombia, Mr. Juan Daniel Ovido Arango, the Director General of Department Administrative National of Statistics, DANE, Colombia. And we have the Ambassador Francisco Gonzalez, Deputy Permanent Representative of Colombia to the United Nations. From Ghana, we have Mr. Omar Sido, the Head of Demographic Statistics and Coordinator of data for SDGs in Ghana, Ghana Statistical Service. And from Philippines, my very dear and close friend, Ms. Liza Percels, the Chief Statistician of the Philippine Statistics Authority. And we will have also the Minister of the Philippines mission to the UN, the Minister Leila Laura Santos. She will not be in our panel here, but she will have kind of intervention from the floor, and Ms. Rosaline Sol from the Philippines mission to the United Nations. So here are actually our esteemed panel members, and to make things really short, so we will start with a presentation by Ms. Irina, where she will give us actually an overview about the coordination of the VNR process at the UN and where we are as countries. And then we will go for two topics to discuss with the panel members. So the floor is yours, Irina.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. distinguished delegates, and I would like first to thank the organizers and the chair for inviting me to be here. Because this is a very important topic. I have been supporting VNR countries since the VNRs began in 2016, and whenever we ask them what do you want to discuss in your preparatory process, the VNR, in your VNR preparations, data always comes at the top. So I'm really excited to be here. And also you have here all the countries that have already presented VNRs except for Ghana, which is coming this year. So I'm sure there are a lot of lessons, and I'm very eager to learn from your experience. Just very quickly to remind us, the 2030 Agenda encourages member states to conduct regular and inclusive reviews of progress at the national and subnational levels. You will see that the 2030 Agenda has also, and the resolution that has established the HLPF, the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development, where the voluntary national reviews are presented with the principles of voluntary reviews. And they are, as you see in their title, they are voluntary, so it really is for the countries to decide when and how they want to present this review. And it's also, as you know, 2030 Agenda is a universal agenda, so it's both for developed and for developing countries. It is state-led, but at the same time, it really needs to be inclusive and also to include subnational levels. And then you have a very important principle, which I know you're going to discuss, is about the rigorous and based on evidence. We have been encouraged countries who are presenting their VNRs from the very beginning to whatever progress that they are showing, that they should, if they at all can, really present an evidence why is the progress and where the countries stand. And of course, for that, you know better than I do that data is very important. It is also a very good platform for partnerships because VNR, if it's only just to tick the box that you have come to the HLPF in New York and presented it, it's not going to be useful to anybody. It really has to be embedded in the national process, in the national implementation of the 2030 Agenda. And that means that you have to have partnerships with everybody. It has to be the national ownership of this agenda has to be come across, and the VNR process can be a very good tool to actually mobilize people around the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. It's also a learning experience because it facilitates lessons learned. Countries we have been supporting, we have a very robust and strong preparatory process with 3 global VNR preparatory workshops and also regional workshops. And in these workshops, countries very openly talk to each other about their challenges, about what progress they have made. They learn from each other. They ask each other, oh, how have you done that? Oh, that works. Okay, fine, because I have a challenge because when we tried that, it didn't work. So, you know, there are a lot of things that countries can learn from each other. A peer learning is a very important element. And of course, as I already said, it has to be open, inclusive, and transparent, so everybody needs to be engaged. These are some of the suggestions of the components of a VNR. There are Secretary General's reporting guidelines, which are of course voluntary for countries to follow if they want to do so. And we have also produced a handbook which is based on all this experience that we have had for the past years, how to conduct a VNR. And here are just some of the components of what a VNR should look like. And most of the countries that are here at the podium and many others have actually used these guidelines and have told us that these guidelines are quite helpful to them in their process. So you see, you go, I mean, it's very natural. You have the summary, but then you start with introduction, then the methodology, how you do it, and then policy and enabling environment, talk about goals and targets, and we always encourage countries to address all 17 SDGs, or at least to address those SDGs that are their national priority. their means of implementation, and then of course some of the next steps and what are your main findings. And we also always encourage countries to have their in annex, if at all possible, to have some statistical annex. And then the importance of data for VNRs. This is something which is your domain, and I'm sure that you will have many good ideas how that can be improved, because as I just said, effective monitoring and review process requires data, and how this is to be, and VNRs can be a good tool to present this implementation and what you are doing at the national level. But of course, if it has a strong evidence-based based approach, it's so much better. And we always encourage countries to be in contact with national statistical offices and to include them in that process. And here are some best practices in VNR development. So this is something again which we have learned from countries during the 3 years of the VNR presentations, from starting early and engaging everybody to, as I already said, to really have not just listing of things that have been done, but to really include analysis and lessons learned and examples, and also to showcase what is the progress that has been made, and what are the weaknesses, what are the areas where the additional support is needed, and what are the next steps in the implementation. Because once you come to New York and you do your VNR, it's not, as I just said, ticking the box. It's really continuing to use this mobilization around the VNR process to continue the national implementation of the 2030 agenda. And let me just finish with some numbers here. So you will see here there are status of VNR. So number of VNR presentations, and why I have put presentations and not countries is because some countries have already come for the second or third time. So this is the number of VNRs that have been presented. And if you look at the years, you will see that each year there are more and more countries that come. And this year we are going to have 50 of them, and 9 of them will be coming for the second time. You also see here this in the second one where you have the there should be the red one. So this one here, you see the how many VNRs have been presented in the ratio of the how many countries there are in each region. And then you will see on the right, you will see here in the pie chart, you see here how many that has been done regionally. And we have also looked at the countries in special situations. As you know, at the UN, least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing countries are considered countries in special situations. So we have also looked at how well and how many of the presentations came in these countries. And then lastly, this is the regional division for this year's VNR. So you will see by region, the 5 regions of the UN, how many countries there are. Most of them are from Africa and Asia Pacific, but there are also other, all the regions are equally also represented. And these are some of the resources that I just mentioned: the Secretary General's Common Reporting Guidelines, the handbook that we produce, and we also have synthesis reports that we do every year. We synthesize what countries have said in each year. So we have done one for each year of the VNR, and after this year, 2019, we'll do the one for 2019. And then, of course, you have a database of VNR reports from previous years. So you can look at the reports of the countries, or if you click on their website, you will find the main messages and the reports from these countries. And I'll finish with that, and if there are any questions, I'll be very happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's really very helpful. So we're talking about having a real partnership with everyone, being open, inclusive, and transparent. And it's really very useful that each country know that we have actually guidelines and we have handbook on how to conduct VNR. So it's really very important, and how we can show cases, what's the progress and weaknesses. And the synthesis reports of the countries is really of crucial and very helpful for us as countries to actually step in. Now we have actually two topics that we would like our esteemed panel to discuss. The first one talk about the statisticians and policymakers working together in the VNR process. So the questions are for the statistician, and I may start with Albania. The Mrs. Delina Ibrahimeh. She's the Director General of Albania's Institute of Statistics. So how are you currently supporting the VNR process in your country? And what are some of the challenges that you have faced in supporting the VNR process? So I would like each of our panel from the Statistical Institute to actually answer such question. And for our policymakers who are actually on the panel, what are actually the data needs in the VNR process that you don't find it, and what are actually the main challenges to incorporate data into the VNR, and how we can have the statistics community and the policy community have really a common language and a real, partnership that we can talk really together in a very easy manner. So I will start with Mrs. Delina. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you for organizing such an interesting side event on data and statistics for evidence-based national voluntary reviews. Actually, it's a very good idea to put statisticians and representatives of policymaking in the same table and discussing data, which is becoming more and more important. Albania reported to the last VNR in 2018, and the VNR process was coordinated by the Prime Minister Office, who is also leading the Agenda 2030 for SDGs. Nevertheless, the document was prepared by a technical working group composed by line ministries and where the National Statistical Office was part of it. Other parties were involved in the preparation of the report, such as the local government units, the civil society, the academia, UN agencies, and other international organizations. The preparations for the VNR followed the guidelines of the Secretary General Common on reporting on the VNR for the structure of the report and the deadlines, which I would like to take the opportunity to congratulate you and DESA for the handbook prepared, as it is a very valuable tool to assist countries who are preparing the reporting at least for the first time. The VNR presented the progress on goals and targets in Albania, giving an overview of the baseline status and SDG priorities in the alignment with the 2030 agenda, with the National Strategy for Development and Integration and other national strategies. It identified the priorities at the national level in achieving the 2030 agenda. The document presented the key priorities in Albania before the introduction of Agenda 2030 and their linkages to the goals, as well as the integration of the 2030 agenda with the EU integration agenda, which is a priority for countries, candidate countries like us. Instat, as part of the technical working group on SDGs, played an active role by giving opinions and sharing the necessary data needed to measure the progress toward the agenda. In addition, Instat volunteered to prepare a statistical annex which accompanied the report. The major challenges in preparing the report were linked to its structure, focus on key priorities of the government, which is positive in terms of showing the strong ownership of the government towards the agenda, but it needs to be followed by national SDG indicators and EU integration indicators. In this context, official statistics were the key tool to measure the progress, but the statistical annex didn't include all the data reported in the VNR. In addition, stakeholders who should play an active role in supporting data production were mainly involved in workshop and consultative roundtables, but not integral part of the VNR production. External stakeholders should be more proactive in these processes. There are lots of challenges in data production and disaggregation, but I must say that the VNR preparation process gave us a good example of what we can achieve with good coordination. It showed that the mechanism in place worked, and it is also the first step for the Statistical Office to produce a publication on SDG indicators. The challenge will be keeping the path in the future. Still, some questions remain and need to be addressed before the next VNR. So do statistical offices have the power to lead and coordinate the process of data production by ensuring that we will produce indicators for leaving no one behind? Will the indicators be nationalized? Who will be in charge of this? And if it will be the NSO, to what extent the indicators will be used nationally for policy-making purposes? We, as Statistical Office, will continue our mission to produce indicators, but we need to work together to have better evidence-based VNRs.
Interesting challenges. So I don't want to go, per statisticians and policymaker. Maybe if you allow me to go and have the point of view of the chief statisticians and the statisticians on the panel, and then we'll see the ambassadors from the countries representative to the UN to see how do they go through it. So I would like if Mr. Juan Daniel Oviedo, the Director General of Department Administrative National of Statistics in Colombia, to give your point of view, towards how are you currently supporting as a National Statistical Institute in Colombia with supporting the VNR process in Colombia, and if you face any kind of challenges that you would like also to present and to the session. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation to this panel session. Essentially, Colombia has already submitted 2 VNRs, one in 2016 and the most recent one in 2018. And the advantage that we have faced in Colombia is that before or instead of seeing the sustainable development goals as another policy strategy, the government and in a whole perspective, the state has decided to take a broad approach, which is an integration approach under which all public policies in Colombia are designed in order to contribute to SDGs. So Colombia, first of all, allowed the National Statistical Office, DANE, which I am representing today, to be part of the interinstitutional or intersectoral committee, which is the main governance body of the Sustainable Development Goals in our country. And this governance body has a triangle, which is the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Planning, and the National Statistical Office, DANE. And we work together in order to integrate all the information which is grasped both at the national and the subnational level. Therefore, DANE is the head of the National Statistical Office in Colombia and allows every institution to adopt the standards of reporting information related to goals of the SDGs and their respective indicators. In that framework, we have been aggregating all the indicators that are produced both at the private sector, subnational level, and national level. However, as we all already know that we are trying to implement SDMX standards to report the information, even if DANE is the leading institution reporting all the Sustainable Development Goals through SDMX, it has been very difficult to get all the institutions in our country, or even the private sector, to adopt that standard. So I think that when we are talking about the VNRs, there are some methodological perspectives that should be addressed in every chapter of these kind of voluntary reports. So mainly, what I wanted to share with you is that probably what has made Colombia successful in reporting its advancements as far or as regards as sustainable development goals, it's a very clear governance of the sustainable development goals in our country, an integration approach under which every public policy or every private strategy has the discipline to see or to evaluate which kind of sustainable development goals are contributing to. And finally, as far as the handicaps or the difficulties in constructing these VNRs, I think that we should find a way as statistical officers how to make the SDMX standard to be more approachable, let's say, or more easy to understand for private and public institutions in order to make the process lighter and to avoid mistakes when we are trying to show which are the main advancements of our countries in this very important social development policy or perspective as far as SDGs are concerned.
Very interesting. And it's been also highlighted by two of you on the importance of how we can have a complementary process within the national policy agenda in the country. I will would like to welcome Ms. Lisa Purcells, the National Statistician for the Philippine Statistics Authority. We know Philippines now is working on a national SDG monitoring system, and maybe it's really a good opportunity to know how can we track SDGs, how can it help within the VNR, and how it can help also the policy community in that perspective. The floor is yours, Lisa.
Thank you very much, Ola. I would like to show you some of our baseline information in our Sustainable Development Goals Watch, which is already in the website of the Philippine Statistics Authority. So how did we do the connection of the Statistics Office with our policy makers in the monitoring of the SDGs? I really like Ms. Arena's statement earlier, start early. So in the Philippines, I would like to believe we didn't start from zero, really, because we came from the MDG's watch. So we learned from the MDG coordination that we did. But the Philippines' participation in the IAEG SDGs discussion for Global Indicators Framework helped us to start early. Because of our participation in the international discussions, we were able to immediately bring to the country the discussion of these indicators and which are priority for us, given our Philippine Development Plan. Thus, because of that, the PSA, the Statistics Office, led the discussion that, hey, we are already committed to SDGs. We are starting the indicators framework. We're starting to collect data. How do we support you, our policymakers and program planners? And thus, Philippines is one of those who volunteered for the first national report. In the first VNR, we didn't have any data yet because we were just starting. Instead, there was a section there on how the statistics system is preparing to support the voluntary national review. Another learning we have is that because of the discussions in the international community we brought to the country level, because it's country-led, all the other 9 ministries participated. So we now have this group we call the focal group for data in supporting SDGs. And this is the statistics group to support the VNR. Currently, I would like to say that there are 2 parallel working groups for SDGs. One is led by our planning ministry that discusses interventions, programs for the Philippines to achieve its commitment to SDGs. The other parallel group is the data support, which is led by the Philippine Statistics Authority, and we bring together the different line ministries, statistics people to provide the data. So this is really where we are now. And just to quickly share with you, as Ola said, we actually already have our Thank you, Yongyi. So this is really where I said we didn't start from zero. We were doing the MDG watch, and this was our final report as of November 2017. 30 indicators were achieved, and we still have 17 under MDGs that were not achieved. Then we have the legal basis for the work, because we need to have a reason, a basis for calling everyone, come and meet with us. So we have our legal framework, a presidential proclamation, our highest policy-making body in the Philippines in statistics is the PSA board, so there's a resolution. There are 2 resolutions to support SDGs. Let me just quickly say that strong partnerships in the country are is very important. So the PSA is the official repository of SDG indicators in the Philippines. We compile and maintain the SDG indicators database and SDG watch. We coordinate the generation and improvement of SDG indicators and provide analysis with partnership of our Statistical Research and Training Institute to give more understanding of not just the line ministries, but of the public as well. And dissemination and communication is really crucial also for understanding. In the next slide, this is where we are now. So we have, of the global indicators, the Philippines identified 155. And so by source of data, 66% really come from administrative data, while 23% from surveys, and the rest is a mix. We already have Philippines regions disaggregation, so 66% have disaggregation by Philippine region. There are 17 Philippine regions. We have 81 provinces, so we have about 42% with the provincial level disaggregation. And by sex, we have 84% of this. This month is Women's Month, and so every March, in the Philippines, we produce fact sheet on women and men, and that is available in the website if you're interested. In the next slide, this is the distribution of the list of our Philippine SDG indicators by sector. Of course, health, nutrition, and agriculture have most. The next would be our environment and disaster risk reduction. In the next slide, we have, as of April 2018, 81.3% of our indicators already have baseline information. In the next slide, we have 68 out of the 155 SDG indicators are in the Philippine Development Plan results matrix. So we mapped SDG indicators with the indicators that are used to track the achievement of our current administration's Philippine Development Plan. In the next slide, so important to us is mapping of these indicators with other indicators so there's no duplication. In the next slide, these are then localized, and this is our website. If you're interested, the SDG baseline information for the Philippines is there. Thank you very much, Ola.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And we would like now to see the perspective of Mr. Omar Sido, the head of demographic statistics and coordinator of data for SDGs in Ghana, in the Ghana Statistical Service. As a statistical office, how are you currently supporting the VNR process? And if you can share your best practices in that perspective, and if you can tell us some of the challenges that you have faced in supporting the VNR process. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you for organizing this event and having Ghana to be part of this discussion. Ghana is joining the VNR for the first time in July. And we are happy that we have this opportunity, among others, to discuss progress that we are making. You realize that Ghana, coming from Africa, is also implementing the Agenda 2063. And we have ensured that we have aligned Agenda 2063, the SDGs, with our own national development framework to ensure we benefit hugely from the lessons learned from the implementation of the MDGs, where we realized that the MDGs era did not actually help us much in developing the statistical system. Why? Because we did not heavily rely on statistics, the implementation of the MDGs. So one of the key things we did is to first have an institutional framework that will guide SDG implementation in the country. So the Office of the President and the President himself constituted what we call the High-Level Ministerial Committee on the SDGs, a 15-member ministerial portfolio that has the Minister for Planning as the chair. And that committee is expected to report to the President every quarter on SDG implementation and monitoring progress. So given the fact that that is more of a policy-making body, then the SDG Implementation Coordination Committee, which is more of a technical structure, was put in place that has the National Development Planning Commission, the Statistical Office, among other stakeholders, including civil society, the private sector. So this committee has the responsibility of ensuring that we coordinate all activities around the SDGs in the country. And of course, here when I say SDGs, I imply SDGs, Agenda 2063, and our own development framework, because these three have been aligned. So with that, we realized that there was the need to assess the national capacity for monitoring progress. So we started since 2016 to address the issues of data. And we realized that we had a huge challenge as a country for monitoring the SDGs because over the years we have hugely relied on surveys and censuses for data. And with the fact that many of these surveys and censuses are not conducted often, then it becomes difficult to monitor progress on achieving the SDGs quite regularly. So this brought to the fore the fact that we need as a country to invest in strengthening the administrative data system. And I'm happy to say that we have actually engaging with other NSOs that are doing very well in that area, and they are supporting us to strengthen the administrative data system. So preparing for the upcoming VNR, the Minister for Planning, who happened to chair the High-Level Ministerial Committee, put together a 6-member team, including myself from the National Statistical Office, to look at what do we do to ensure that the VNR is actually guided by data and statistics, so that whatever we're saying, we have the evidence to indicate where Ghana is doing well and where we are not doing well. And through this process, we have had a series of consultations leading up to the point where we have had to engage with various government departments and civil society in particular, because we realize that if you want to rely heavily on the national statistical system alone to get the data for the SDGs, we may not be able to touch on many areas, especially ensuring we leave no one behind. So Ghana will be one of the countries who will be leveraging data from civil society, academia, and other places. And so these are the institutional structures we have put in place to ensure that we leverage on data to drive the VNR process in Ghana. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for touching the base on the institutional framework. That's really very important, and how it can be done just to ensure no one left behind. So I will move to our policy community. And allow me to start with the Ambassador Francisco González, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Colombia to the United Nations. And our question to you as a policy actually maker, what are your data needs in the VNR process? Do you face any kind of challenges to incorporate data into the VNR? Do you face any kind of challenge working with the National Statistical Institute of Colombia? And if you also allow us, if you have any suggestions on the ways to bring the statistical and policy communities together in the VNR process. For us, it's really very important also not to forget that it's not only just writing a voluntary national report, it's how really to get use of it in our country. I mean, it's not only just a report to present it in the name of our country. It's actually an accumulation of how we want to develop our policies, our priorities based on the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is really, for us, it's really very important. So what are also some of the tools that can be used to facilitate this collaboration? What are some of your data needs in the rounds of the VNR, especially, I mean, Colombia, it's not only one VNR report, I think it's more than one VNR report that you have already submitted. So we would like just to listen to you. So the floor is yours, Mr. Ambassador Francisco.
Thank you very much, and both to the Statistical Commission to organize this event, and to the panelists today who have provided already substantial thoughts and ideas on the topic of our panel, data and statistics for evidence-based voluntary national reviews. Now, in the case of Colombia, just as my colleague just presented, this is the second time that Colombia has presented the voluntary national review for the second time. After almost 4 years since the adoption of the process of the SDGs, our assessment is quite positive. There are many actions still to achieve the commitments, and most importantly, to generate truly transformative activities, particularly in the area of capacity building, technology, knowledge development, transference and dissemination in the developing countries. In the case of Colombia, one of the tool, the most important tool to achieve these goals has been the compass, or the national tool, the national policy, which domestically has guided the implementation of this. The compass document and other actions taken by the government of Colombia in the implementation of the 2030 agenda has already been presented. It was presented in July last year, and we of course follow from the lessons that we learned in our first presentation in 2016. We're very proud to have the SDGs compass, because through the establishing of a monitoring and reporting framework, a statistical strengthening plan, a strategy of subnational implementation and monitoring, and a mechanism for engagement with non-governmental stakeholders, including private sectors, we have made a state policy that will last for the next 3 governments. These documents, the compass document, constitutes then a roadmap for design and implementation of the policies and programs at all levels, including the priority measures in the future. Now, concerning the challenges that we face ahead of us, I would point out at least the following: articulation with longer-term national development plans, higher levels of community appropriation at the local level, and the articulation with the financial planning as a tool, or turning financial planning into a tool for the implementation of the SDGs. Of course, this has in the framework of one premise, which is that no country in the world has by itself the capacity to effectively monitor all targets and goals of the 2030 Agenda. I mean, we need, in this effort, we need the collaboration of as a government, of the private sector and the civil society as a whole, to complement and strengthen and appropriate the sources of information. So, in the challenges, articulation with the longer-term national development plan, what I'd like to highlight here is the alignment of the SDGs, in the case of Colombia, with the national development plans. This is already happening in Colombia through the National Development Plan 2018-2022, PAC for Colombia, PAC for Equity, demonstrating a cross-cutting approach of the SDGs in the design, which will allow an organized and coordinated action between the different actors, also guaranteeing the continuity of the process and taking advantage of the early victories achieved in recent years. However, this is only the first step. We have to materialize, and in order to materialize, we have to align or ensure that these two documents will speak to each other and for something for which we're going to, of course, introduce and have to introduce changes and modifications as we go along. In the area of higher levels of community appropriation, we have to redouble our efforts to achieve social appropriation of the 2030 Agenda at all levels. The achievement of the SDGs is a guarantee of better conditions for all nationals, for all Colombians. Actions that focus on the socialization appropriations by all the actors will facilitate the participation, particularly those in the areas of collaboration with at the local, at the subnational level, on the production of statistics that are more meaningful and more reliable. And finally, on the area of financial planning as a tool, I just mentioned that we have put in place new financing mechanisms for sustainable development. Despite the resources obtained in the first years of implementation, it is necessary to guarantee a real and predictable budget in the long term, both by the national government, the territorial governments, the private sector, the international cooperation. And statistics are key in this point, because they allow us to measure the real impacts of the resources that we are destining to each SDG, and to make also informed decisions in every aspect. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I really thank you for this intervention and really stress on the challenges on the national also level when we talk about the financial, and when we talk about also on our national actually development policies. And from that perspective, I would like to ask Ms. Ingrid Prizorina, the first Secretary of Permanent Mission of the Republic of Albania to the United Nations. I mean, yes, our challenge also, it's on the national level. It's more on sometimes that our national policy for development in countries has been set before the endorsement of the SDGs, and that sometimes you see the contradiction on how you want actually to monitor the development based on the SDGs, which actually the national policy for development of the country is not actually, wasn't set on that perspective. Is this the case in Albania?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor, and to the organizers for giving us, to all of us, this opportunity for sharing our own experiences on the VNRs and the paramount relevance of the indicators and statistics in it? My direct answer to you will be no. And I'll go, after a short introduction, I'll explain why. The exercise of the VNR itself is quite a complex one. It's an excellent opportunity for all institutions, national, domestic, and regional ones as well, UN agencies in a country and the civil society to work all together on how to maximize the deliverance of the 2030 agenda on a measurable manner through the goals and its targets. And my answer is no, because at the outset, I would like to highlight that the government of Albania, with other 4 countries, got involved in a UNDP project in serving as a pilot country for drafting the indicators of SDG 16. And this was a preliminary exercise on how we could have worked on an indicator-oriented basis on the implementation of the SDGs or Agenda 2030. Further on, prior to the VNR presentation in July 2018, the government of Albania, in partnership with the National Statistics Office and under the leadership of Ms. Ibrahima, which I would like to highlight, and the support of the UN agencies, have launched the report on the harmonization of SDGs with the existing sectorial policies, through which was scrutinized the readiness of the country to implement the 17 SDGs by considering the national, strategic, and institutional frameworks. The report envisaged all the institutional responsibility for the implementation of the SDGs by indicating institutions in charge with leading efforts to implement every SDG, but also reflecting the degree of responsibility. The report acknowledged that a policy area assessment indicates that 140 SDG targets, or 83% of the total, are directly linked to specific components of the second National Strategy for Development and Integration 2015-2020, main pillars covering the policy areas for the same sectors in Albania. The importance of SDG framework is reflected in the main key government priorities of the National Strategy for Development and Integration 2015-2020 and associated with their SDG reference as follows: good governance, SDG 16, energy, SDG 7, FDIs and domestic investment, SDG 9, water management, SDG 6, land management, SDG 15, financial structural reform, SDG 17. Policy area assessment indicated that 140 SDG targets, or 83% of total, are directly tied to the specific components of the National Strategy for Development and Integration. The other SDG targets are mostly inapplicable for Albania, as they are designed to serve the priorities for sustainable development in different kind of countries, not the one that respond to the Albanian economic development, historical policy and political orientations, etc. The shared feature between Albania's policy goals and the SDG targets exists also beyond the National Strategy for Development 2015-2020 framework. An assessment of the national strategy and policy documents under the outside of the National Development Document umbrella identifies 134 SDG targets, or 79 of the total, directly linked to the national strategic policy framework surrounding the document for the development of the country 2015-2020. Under this kind of approach was made the alignment of the SDG targets with the national priorities, and after this scrutinized exercise happened that Albania resulted in a very good alignment of policies for SDG 7, 3, SDG 8, SDG 9, and good alignment on SDG 1, 16, 2, 4, 5, SDG 11, SDG 17, SDG 6, SDG 10, SDG 13, partial alignment for SDG 12 and SDG 15, limited alignment for SDG 14. All these findings are part of the VNR, Her Excellency Senida Messi, previous Deputy Prime Minister of Albania, had in her introduction last year in July. Obviously, there are also challenges to be acknowledged, and as it was mentioned from my colleague from Colombia, the integrational aspect of the VNR or of the implementation of Agenda 2030, the cross-cutting issues, etc. But it's also very important to keep up all the momentum about this importance that has given to the statistics and to the data and data disaggregation for the process itself. Also, to keep up all the to keep up the momentum and to keep involved all the stakeholders and the leadership that all the institutions and the civil society has shown in this process. And what I wanted to highlight that the best result Albania got from this exercise was the acknowledgement of the civil society, who sent a letter to the government in appreciating the role of Albania or its leadership in leading the process of implementing at this stage the Agenda 2030 at country level. Thank you.
Wow. This is why, I mean, really thank you for your intervention. And this is actually, Albania is considered is one of the best, actually, best practices between countries in presenting their VNR, and it's where you actually submitted more than one, actually, during the previous years. And we really very much appreciate how you tried to show the case on how the progress went and how it's actually structured. And this is where we can also consider your case is one of really the best practices on how you bring the statistical community and policy community. And this eventually reflect towards really a strong VNR in that perspective. Before we go and open the floor for discussion, I would like to allow me to present the Minister, Leila Laura Santos, from the Philippines Mission to the United Nations. She's here. And Ms. Rosalind Sol, also from the Philippines Mission to the United Nations. If you like to actually add an intervention on how it actually Philippines move towards the VNR and how is your collaboration within the Philippine Statistics Office, and if you have any kind of challenges on how to bring it together. The floor is yours. We need technical support here. Please go ahead.
Okay. Allow me to read the statement of Minister Leila Laura Santos as for the upcoming HLPF under the auspices of the ECOSOC, the Philippines will be presenting its VNR for the second time. We also wish to note that as Vice President in the ECOSOC Bureau representing Asia and the Pacific Group, we are closely involved in ensuring that the HLPF program allows substantial space for VNR to be highly interactive and truly a peer learning mechanism. Since the adoption of the SDGs, the Philippine government has carried out several activities relating to setting up the policy and enabling environment for the implementation of the SDGs. Further activities have also been conducted regarding compilation and analysis of data for monitoring the country's condition on the SDGs. The National Economic and Development Authority, as a cabinet-level agency responsible for economic development and planning, looks into synergies of the SDG indicator framework in relation to the monitoring of the country's medium and long-term development plans. All concerned government agencies have been enjoined to provide the data necessary for support for monitoring the global goals. The Philippine Statistics Authority was designated as the official repository of SDG indicators for the country. From October 2015 to May 2017, the Philippine government, through the PSA, conducted several technical, multi-sectoral workshops with concerned data producers and compilers regarding the SDG indicators. This process identified 103 SDG global indicators, as well as 28 proxy and 25 supplementary indicators, for a total of 156 indicators that are supposedly readily available from the entire Philippine statistical system. As one of our challenges, we note that during our VNR preparation, we have not fully exhausted the migration and development nexus due to lack of relevant migration data. This is why during last week's migration meetings, we called on for increased support for improving migration data. It is said that if you are not counted, you do not count. Thus, for the Philippines, data is not only crucial, but it is at the core of our SDG commitment and consequently our VNR presentation in our national efforts to ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your intervention, and I would like to open the floor for discussion. Please.
Yes, thank you. So I'm Mark Krzysztof, Director General of Croatian Bureau of Statistics. I wanted to comment this process of the preparation of the VNR. We are also, as a country, in the preparation of the VNR, and we'll be presenting it this year. And I do feel that the presentations have really highlighted the need to have an excellent cooperation between policymakers, and in a sense political structures and the statisticians. Because in the end, if you do not have good counterparts on the other side, no matter how high quality your statistical system is, in the end the policy decisions won't be of high quality. There's an old saying that not everything that is countable is worth counting. So I do really feel that DESA should make some sort of a recommendation to strengthen the analytical policy-making capacities in every, basically, countries in order to have better evidence-based decision-making, because that is not often the case. We all live in different administrative systems with different resources. And so just like our statistical offices are a bit different, even though that we have a common framework and well-set standards, our counterparts are completely different. So in a sense, I really feel that some work is needed from UN level to address this particular point, because we all need to have realistic national goals, and we need to have realistic priorities on basically measuring the remainder of the SDGs, which are not often easily obtainable by statistical systems.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Madam Chair, my name is Alexandra Silverstolp and I'm the founder of Data Act Lab. We are based in Stockholm, Sweden, at the Royal Institute of Technology, working on data visualization, helping countries to visualize implementation of the SDGs. I'm just thinking of the VNR as a process and wonder if the current practice of the VNR processes allows for really proper analysis and evidence-based analysis and policy making. Currently, I think the VNRs and the HLPF has been a real success. So many countries come forward and want to report. But the question is, how do we use the opportunity of the VNRs and the HLPF to become the real proper tool and process for inclusive dialogue and evidence-based policy making? And the question is here, what happens in between the VNRs that are being presented here in New York? Can we open up the processes and start the processes of VNRs at a much earlier stage in the country, so there can be proper input from data and evidence and so on? And a report is a report, but a review really requires a lot of analysis. And I just wonder what kind of appetite there is from you and DESA to make the VNRs, the processes that they are earlier, that they are more transparent, integrated, and analytical. We are currently working on a platform called Goal Tracker that allows countries to report track performance of the SDGs and are thinking of integrating a tool, an integrated VNR tool that could allow the countries to pull data and analytics directly from their data to make an open and inclusive automated VNR report that could be shared throughout the year and have citizens, researchers comment upon it. Is there an openness for something like this? Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question, please. The floor is yours. I know, I'm really sorry. I know that we have so many, questions, but I'm really very much limited to the time because we have also a high-level seminar which will start very soon. So if I just give one more question and then we can give the panel members, just 1 minute per country to respond. So the floor is yours, and I apologize for the rest.
Thank you very much to all the speakers for their presentation. Nicolas Fazel from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. My first question would be to the statistician colleagues first. How do you move from statistical annexes to evidence-based analysis where gaps may be revealed? How you make that step? And my second question to all, if you could elaborate on the process for identifying the groups left behind, and in this context, where I think all your countries have national human rights institutions, were they involved in the identification of the groups left behind? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I would like to give the panel members 1 minute, so in order not to really take so much time. And I would like to start with Irina, because you have a couple of questions that has been raised to you.
Thank you very much, and it was really very interesting. Just to make one thing clear, the UNDESA is a secretariat, so we are supporting the countries. We are not in the driving seat here. What we are doing is we are trying to provide the space for the countries to achieve all of that what you were talking about. So we have all these preparatory workshops, and we ask countries, what do you want to discuss? Data is always at the top. And we provide with our colleagues here in Statistical division in DESA, we always do this together. So but it's really for the countries because it's a VNR process. And what are countries doing in between? A lot of countries are doing a lot of things. 2 countries come to my mind. I won't name them, but some of them are presenting their VNR national reports every year to their own public. Some are presenting their reports to parliaments. So countries are doing different things. But it's really, the V in VNR is voluntary. So it's really up to countries to do what they want. But of course, we are here. We are open to any good things. We have a knowledge exchange that we do every year at the first VNR workshop, where we invite everybody who has some tools, some good things that they can offer countries. Please come and present what you can offer to countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Irina. And maybe I just also want to comment, it's really very important also to bring, the Statistical Institute onto board, even in presenting the VNR. It's really very important on how we want really to bridge this gap between the statistical community and the policy community. I would love really to give 1 minute per country, if you allow me, and we'll start with Albania.
Very quickly, I would like to highlight that the preparation of this VNR was a learning process for the National Statistical Office and for the government, and it showed us that we can collaborate together and we can move forward. And it shows us the gaps and the challenges that we have in order to measure what needs to be measured, not to leave no one behind. We will continue working. Many statistical offices are preparing dashboards and platforms for presenting SDGs SDGs, so everybody can use the data that are produced. And here I also want to highlight that the communication with different stakeholders and all the people is very important, because this is a big process, and it's not only the government and the statistical offices who will need to work on measuring. And then Last, I want to highlight that the importance of having nationalized indicators, and we will be working based on the VNR process and the work that we have done together in order to measure the national priorities. We will be working in the future into building a new national development strategy for integration, which has the SDG indicators included in the in this new NSDI. And then last, I want to highlight the budgeting part and the needs and the resources part, which are very important, and the governments from the VNR and from the total SDG discussions now think that statistics are more important. So I think that they will support the statistical office much more in terms of budgeting.
Thank you very much. Colombia.
What we wanted to address as a closing remark is that we strongly believe that governance is a very important issue as far as alignment of all the private and public sector. But also we have to make the indicators linked to the SDGs useful for normal people. Yeah, because the issue is that we have 200 indicators. In Colombia, we have 165. But we need these self-regulation exercises to become also a self-assessment exercises under which every actor or every stakeholder of society, either private or public, see there that something is happening in society. Because sometimes as we are a bit obsessed about measuring everything, we forget that the Sustainable Development Goals are very deep as far as a development model. So, for example, in Colombia, we are trying to open like a triple helix model under which we are linking to academia and higher education to do some reflections in future students why these sustainable development goals are very important. So I think that the most important issue of this VNR is that we can associate this report to a self-assessment of how the governance and how the financial resources and how the perception of society about those goals is increasing as far as time goes by. That's the main closing remark that we wanted to share with you.
Thank you very much. Ghana?
Thank you very much. I think, as I did mention earlier, the process, especially the institutional arrangement in Ghana, has made us learn a lot in terms of the need for the statistical community and policy community to work together in the implementation and monitoring of the SDGs. Particularly, one thing comes to mind where in 2018, the Minister for Finance identified that the work we're doing needed to reflect in the budget. So he tasked the team, including the Statistical Office, to review the 2018 budget to see how much allocation has been made to each of the SDG targets and which government departments have these allocations. And it brought to the fore the fact that so many government departments have not actually understood the need to reflect their budgets and the SDGs in their budgets. And so in 2019, the minister issued a communique to all government department guidelines on how to prepare the budget for 2019 to 2021. And as we speak now, we are currently preparing a guideline on what we call SDG budget, because the results framework has been linked to the budget. So no government department can withdraw funding from the consolidated fund without indicating which specific ISDG targets the funding is going to help. So these are some of the things that Ghana is learning through the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Philippines.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to say that I showed you the SDG Watch earlier. So now, from SDG Watch to the Voluntary National Review. And I will assure, Nicola asked this question, in the Voluntary National Review for the Philippines, the data are not just annexes, they're actually embedded in the review. I already have seen the zero draft of the Philippines Voluntary National Review because the Statistics Office was asked to give comments on what was written already. So this is an example also of the recognition that the Statistics Office is part of the Voluntary National Review. I would like to say also that in the Philippines, we have a very, very active civil society. So during the MDG years, the government has an MDG report and the civil society has its own, what they call shadow report. And they submit this shadow report to the planning ministry and see how different the government's report is from theirs. So I expect that our civil society, the Philippines, will also have its own SDG shadow report soon. On financing, for the Statistics Office, the financing and the budgetary support of government is mainstream. So there is, the government now is really fully supporting the work of the Statistics Office. The process also for the budgeting of statistics in the Philippines is that the Philippine Statistics Authority Board asks different line ministries that will do data collection to submit the budget, reviewed by the PSA board, and upon review endorsed to our budget ministry, saying, budget ministry, we reviewed the needed support for these line ministries and for the PSA for the data collection for this coming year, give the budget. So it's not always provided by the budget ministry, but we have given, the budget ministry gave us a report recently that they've approved about 85% of the requested budget for the whole Philippine statistical system. But I have good news that for the Philippine Statistics Authority, all our core activities are funded by government. So the upcoming census of population and housing, for 3 years, we've had the budget that we need to prepare for it. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Lisa. I mean, this is really very interesting, very attractive topic, really to discuss. We really call the Statistics Division to keep it really on the agenda on every, as a side event on the commissions, on the upcoming ones. It's really very important. It's really the beginning now. And it's really very important to make sure, I mean, we have so many challenges. We're talking about financing, we're talking about capacity building, we're talking about that the voluntary national review process is not only a tool to present the progress made by countries. It's really very important to actually to strengthen the national partnership. This is the most important thing, and also to enhance the cooperation on the implementation of our national policy inside our countries. So this session, we have to end this session. So I would like really to thank the panel members for your really thrilled and exciting really presentations and interventions from your side. And it was really very important that we really have on the panel members from the statistical community and policy community, which was really of great importance, and having also UNDESA on board on bringing the attention of the VNR and how it is actually worked out within the UNDESA. So, and I want to really thank you for your presence and for your attention and being and participating in this session. Thank you, everyone, and big applause for our panel members. Thank you very much.